Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium's third in a series of webinars on supply chain management readiness assessment. In today's webinar, we're going to focus on industry benchmarking and how to align and create an action plan aligned to this 13-tenet assessment. We really appreciate that you joined us today, and we look forward to your feedback in the chat window and or the Q&A and in the polling. Again, this is the third webinar in our series of 5 webinars. Our next webinar is in February 23rd. My name is Jim DeVries. I'm founder and president of Enhance International Group, and we partner with the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium to host today's webinar. Today we have Connor Fitcham, who's helping us out from Uphaven. So thank you, Connor, from South Africa. And so please, again, be prepared to answer the questions and provide your comments in the chat. Featured today, of course, here is Greg Schlegel. Greg has his vast experience, is one of the original founders of Supply Chain Risk Management and former president of Apex ASCM. Greg, a few words?
You bet, Jim. Thanks a lot. Greetings, all. Pleasure to be here with you today to talk about our passion of the last 13 years. I am the founder of the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium. We've been in business for 13 years. We'll talk a little bit more, give you a thumbnail sketch in a moment. I've taught this body of knowledge for 10 years at Lehigh University. I do teach enterprise risk management at Villanova. I got 8 years with IBM as a supply chain executive consultant, and about 30 years, perhaps like many of you, as a supply chain exec for a couple of Fortune 100. So again, thanks for attending and look forward to a lively discussion. Jim.
Thanks, Greg. And a little bit of my background for the past 30 years as a master black belt and transformation executive. I've served as a resilient leader for startups to Fortune 500s. I've worked on a number of global teams to identify, prioritize, and deliver high return on investment, sustainable improvements, and self-funding results. I've held a number of leadership positions in sales, customer service, supply chain, finance, reporting, new product development. And I started my career at GE and spent about 15 years under Jack Welch there. Our teams have developed resilient enterprise ecosystems. That's our main goal here and we have accelerated digitization, innovation, supply chain risk and resiliency, supply chain management, leadership development, and value creation. My core belief is that success starts with discovering the untapped potential in your employees, from the leadership down to the shop floor, including suppliers and customers. We live in an ecosystem. It is in developing others that we can build our resilient enterprise. With that, we'll get started here. Greg, a few words on the consortium.
You bet. Thanks, Jim. We said we'd give you a real quick profile of who we are and what we do. On the right-hand side of the chart are our members. We're about 31 companies at the moment. That's about 1,700 supply chain risk professionals around the globe. These companies bring tools, techniques, methodologies, and solutions to help us identify, assess, mitigate, and manage supply chain risks. We've broken down the members into 3 categories, if you can see, focusing on education, consulting, and software as a service. On the left-hand side, we think we provide 5 areas, products and services. One area is online education. We have 2 certificate courses online. You receive a certificate from Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium and Educazi, our platform partner. One is a basic supply chain risk and resiliency course. The other is geared towards services, logistics, and public healthcare supply chains. Second, we do a lot of coaching and consulting with organizations on their journey. We bring platform solutions that actually do the heavy lifting in terms of identifying and assessing and providing visibility. And then we have 2 online assessment tools. The first is Supply Chain Management Online Readiness. That's what we're going to talk about today, which measures your supply chain process maturity and your inherent risk. And the second is a prescriptive online survey assessment tool that gets into pure risk maturity, risk appetite, and risk culture, and with action plans. And it uses some AI and ML algorithms. So that's a quick thumbnail sketch of the consortium. I'll turn it back to Jim.
Thanks, Greg, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to share a little bit about EIG. We're an exchange of passionate experts to guide your transformation, to provide those self-generating and self-funding results. We have over 50 consultants, consulting companies, and SaaS providers that are focused on providing you that difference to help your enterprise and enable it. EIG serves as the master integrator to provide you access to the best and brightest companies. So these are vetted companies. And so we'll act as a Swiss Army knife for you to find the right service and the right people to help you in your company. Just as it shows here, the EIG has modeled this, created this model of this ecosystem. We've talked about strategy and execution and the tactics to drive that, which is the chain. And the larger of the 2 wheels is strategy. And one good rotation of strategy can result in many good execution cycles. So that's what we really want. We want to develop an agile supply chain and mindset that will ensure that we're successful on our journey. In summary, a strongly linked strategy to execution ecosystem results in positive momentum for the company, its employees, customers, suppliers, and shareholders. Quoting Albert Einstein, "Life is like a bicycle. To keep your balance, you need to keep on moving." And with that, just a little bit overview of our webinar series here. We're on webinar 3. The first 2 webinars are available on the website at the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium. Our next webinar comes in next month on the 23rd. We hope to see you there. There we'll be focusing on the playbook. And our 5th webinar is a capstone webinar to help you sell supply chain readiness assessment within your organization and the value. With that, just an outline of the different tiers. We have 4 tiers for the supply chain management readiness assessment. Tier 1 is free online, and the link is in the deck, and it's also on our website, and that's a single user perspective. So you're welcome to complete the form of the 100 and so questions to assess where you think you are from a supply chain management readiness perspective. The second tier 2, is what we covered in our last webinar, and that tier focuses on looking across your organization leadership team and compare the results and combine those results to give you an overall understanding of where you're at in supply chain management from a maturity perspective. And in that tenet, we look at strategic, tactical, and operational perspectives also, and we provide coaching about 8 hours. This tier that we're talking about today is going to get into benchmarking you relative to other companies in your industry, as well as giving you an aligned action plan to help you perform those tasks that need to be to get you to a higher level maturity. And then here we include coaching about 16 hours. And then tier 4 is very prescriptive and tailored to you. And there you'll get a supply chain readiness playbook and more coaching for that. So with that, we'll go back to the survey question, see what responses we have so far. Looks like everybody seems to be pretty comfortable with how the supply chain is performing relative to your competitors. Greg, any comments on what you're seeing out there?
Well, it's always good. Appreciate your the audience participation. There's no right or wrong answer here. It's just more or less a perception of how your supply chain is performing relative to your competitors, because we think it's pretty important, especially with some of the macroeconomic forecasts coming our way in 2023, let alone the supply chain disruptions. So all good. You know, there's a little bit of a difference there. Well, we always like to use the poll EV because it's kind of a horse race. You know, we can watch it. It's live. It's a lot of fun. But we use it to try to get you engaged in the conversation. So appreciate your engagement and filling it out. And it's all a matter of perspective. But what we would like to do is to give you a sense of what the tools and techniques that we can provide to basically give you a good sense of where you are and what your maturity is. So thanks a lot for engaging in the poll.
With that, the agenda, just quickly go through the agenda here. And first, we'll go through the compelling reasons to promote supply chain readiness. Then we'll cover the industry benchmark definitions, then the industry background development, and then we'll get into the supply chain readiness industry benchmark and align action plan tool, how it works, and then we'll cover how to develop a value prop, and then how to get started. With that, Greg, kick us off.
You bet. Our first section is we thought we'd share with you a couple of compelling reasons to promote supply chain readiness. So I think in our next slide, we essentially can give you some salient statistics, some data points. We start back in 2021 on the left. This is from Gartner Worldwide Survey, about a couple of hundred different companies. The legend here is they post questions or statements, and then the legend is, the dark blue is we agree pretty much with that, the yellow is neutral, and then the gray is, well, we kind of disagree, and that's fine. I just wanted to focus on the first two. This is 2021, still within the pandemic. Top one was, within 2 years, we will invest to make our supply chains more agile. Very encouraging. Almost 90% of the folks said we agree. That's a plan we have. The second was, within 2 years, we will invest to make our supply chains more resilient. All good. Again, almost 90% of the folks agreed with that. Now we want to move to the right side and talk about 2023. And so we thought we'd share these salient statistics with you. Up on the top, this was from a freight friend of the consortium, did a global survey just recently, the end of 2022, and they asked the question, due to the global disruptions over the past 2 years, has your company decided to bring more operations closer to home? Well, about 30% said yes, but what I really thought was interesting is the graphic on the top right, and that is, in which they asked the question, in which geographic areas has your company increased operations? Take a look. Canada, US, Mexico, basically North and South America. Very interesting, especially bringing operations back into the US. So we wanted to share that with you. And then on the bottom right, some of our friends of the consortium who share a lot of data with us. McKinsey, in their 2023 Global Supply Chain Report, calls the globalization or let's say, the modification of globalization, rewiring. All right, that's what they call it. They also say, well, global ties still bind. They went into by major region of the globe and said that almost every region still imports 25% or more of at least one key resource that they need to add value. All right. Another one, China's demonstrated it's really no longer a great partner, all right, or reliable partner. That comes from ARC. And then finally, CNBC did a survey back in November of last year, and things are changing. U.S. shippers are seeing a 20% drop in ocean freight orders. Ocean carriers are doing what we call ghost sailings, which means they're sailing from one port to another with hardly any containers on the ship. And the pricing, Asia to West Coast prices, are down more than 80% from last year. So definitely a different world, folks, from the last 2 years. And we have some additional salient statistics to share with you. This again comes from McKinsey, who again shares a lot of data with us. And they did a global survey back in May of 2022 across multiple industries. And their question was, which of the following conditions makes your company most vulnerable to chain disruptions due to any cause, including COVID? And so up on top, the legend, the colored legend, is the light blue is automotive and assembly. The dark blue were chemicals. The light green were consumer and packaged goods. And then the dark green was pharmaceuticals. So you get a picture image of the responses of 4 different major industries. And then on the left in the middle are the McKinsey's supply chain issues that they codified, and then they asked the respondents to render an opinion. And then what we want to do is, we thought it'd be interesting, is to go through McKinsey's supply chain issues and align them with the supply chain management readiness assessment tenets in the tool. So we can just go down and just give you a sense of alignment. They say demand variability. The respondents said, whoa, that's an issue. We have a demand management tenet in best practices and so forth. They said sole sourcing and non-sustainable inputs. We have a tenet in there called supply and purchasing. Long input lead times. We have a tenet in there that basically covers supply and purchasing. Low just-in-time inventory. We have agility, we have logistics tenet in there. They said a lack of visibility on supplier risks. We have an integrated supply chain tenet, which touches on that. Concentrated production. We have a tenet called adaptive manufacturing. Risk-prone logistics. We have, again, the logistics and supply tenet. Aging plant and equipment, we have something called adaptive manufacturing. And short shelf life of products, we have S&OP in there as a tenet. So we feel our assessment tool is nicely aligned with the issues that McKinsey brought up in terms of going forward. And we think the tool can help you improve your supply chain process maturity. So with that, we'll finish up this section with a couple of motivations for you to use supply chain management readiness assessment. We just put in a couple quick ones. Number one, the use of supply chain manufacturing operations to create winning strategies. And hopefully you'll see during the session how you might be able to do that. Another one was feed your annual operating plan. That's really your budget, your classic financial going forward yearly budget. Third, transform supply chain processes for better productivity. Who doesn't want that? Fourth, maybe boost your operational health by identifying some skill gaps and building capabilities. So the net on the bottom is, we feel the tool fosters an image of your as-is capabilities in your supply chain to provide a roadmap for you to achieve competitive advantage. So with that, I'll turn it back to Jim.
Thanks, Greg. Very interesting. So with that, we're going to get into a little bit back to school, so to speak, supply chain readiness, industry benchmarks, some definitions. And we're going to start with a wiki definition of what it is. Well, what is benchmarking? Benchmarking, as Wiki likes to say, is a process where you measure your company's success against your competitors to discover how to improve performance. So it could be against competitors, internal, and we'll get into that in a minute here. So, why is it important? Because if you don't know where you are relative to your competition, then your competition is going to pass you by, right? There are some different benchmarking types. There's best in class, performance, business performance, internal business unit comparison, competitive industry, and there's some other ones, but we're going to cover these 3 or 4 right now. So in best in class, that provides you footing into where you are relative to business standards, so best practices. So that can get old and tired if those best practices don't fit your business. Therefore, looking at it at tier 2 perspective is how do you compare similar core process across your business and other companies, regardless of industry. And tier 2 offering that we have provides you with that standardized way for you to gain that unbiased view of your business, leveraging the input from your key business decision makers in your company. So they're answering the questions to see where they're at, where you're at. The next is an internal business comparison. So you can start looking at your different business units that you have within your company and compare how well everybody is implementing those best practices, and then share how you can leverage those across the company. And then the last one, competitive industry, is our tier 3 offering that we'll be talking about today, provides a very powerful comparison of where you are relative to your competitors within your industry. Not only your direct competitors, but your suppliers and your customers upstream and downstream of you. So what are their expectations? So what does that mean to you? It prioritizing an aligned action plan is key to success. Translating where you are into action is the key to making the difference in your organization. For tier 3, we not only focus on where you are, but where you are going. And we do this by adding a dimension in here where we ask you to prioritize each of the 13 tenets on a scale 1 to 10 on importance, aligned to your goals, and satisfaction to your current performance. And then we look at how do you feel about being where you are at today and what actions will you be implementing. So that's why we integrate this into your annual operating plan, and we suggest that this be part of your process. So if you're still looking at what you're going to focus on, or you're still not clear, having this assessment is going to provide you a lot of clarity from a supply chain perspective of where you need to focus. So for tier 2, again, best in class segmentation rankings, just as a recap a bit, we went into the blue, which is your strategic level, the red, which is your tactical, and the green, which is operational. So there's, again, 13 tenets. And as you see on the graph on the right, the blue will give you that overall average score, the red, another average score, and the green, another average score. So whatever is closest to the center, remember, is your best performing. So in this case, as you see from the graph very easily, is that the red is where this company is performing the best, and the blue is the least. So the red, of course, is what we talked about, tactical level. So at the tactical level, they're performing well, but at the strategic level, they're not so much, and they're in between on the operational level. So that helps guide you on where you need to focus your efforts. So in this case, you probably need some more strategy alignment to the supply chain. So now we move to tier 3 in the industry benchmark. And this is asking where you are relative to your industry. So in doing this, we're going to have to introduce a new language here, and that is quartiles. So on the right-hand side, we have our quartiles from bottom up, from minimum, which is the lowest number score, average score, to the 25th percentile. So think of percentile as if you had 100 data points, this is the 25th from the lowest data point. This is the 50th, and this is the 75th. And this averages may or may not work. Most of these distributions are not normal distributions. So we use percentiles to make sure that we identify the lower quartile, which are the laggards, the lower quartile to medium, which is the average, the upper quartile, the followers, and of course, the leaders up at the top, which is between what we call P75 and the maximum. So again, think of this as breaking up into a pie, into quadrants, and you break it up into there, and you identify where you're at and where you're performing. So again, this is how we identify it in our tier 3 offering. This is our first deliverable in that tier 3 offering, and is where you're at. So is your company here, or are you down here? And we'll get into that in a moment. A little bit background on the industry, supply chain management readiness industry development. Just let's talk about what a supply chain is first. And here we have laid out a supply chain with figures here, starting with you're making your product, and from sourcing, and before you make the product, you have to design it. So you start with design engineering, you purchase your product to make it, you plan your scheduling, your production, into production monitoring and reporting, and then into management decision report, and now you're up and running. But it doesn't end there, right? Because there may be customer management, there may be returns, there may be issues, and that's going to affect your returns on distribution and your order fulfillment. Are you making everything you plan to make? What aren't you able to make? And then how are you managing your inventory? Is your inventory matching your demand? And you're getting into your logistics to get it there from your suppliers. So that's just an overview of supply chain. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Greg.
You bet. Thanks a lot, Jim. In this section, we wanted to give you a sense of the genesis of this supply chain management assessment tool. So essentially on the right-hand side, the tool was born out of a first-of-a-kind MBA supply chain risk and management course at Lehigh University. All right. The approach and the tool worked so well that we actually took it on the road about a year after our first year in the MBA course. The tool's been operating for more than 10 years, folks. We've actually utilized this tool and several other versions in classrooms, in workshops, in webinars, and with clients in engagements. We do have a couple different versions that are a little more sophisticated. What we're talking about here is tier 1, which is free for you. All right, we've upgraded the tool using an LMS, a learning management system platform. So it's not spreadsheets anymore. It's up on a learning platform, and the URL is below. You can click on it, but I'll just recap the chart, what you're looking at. Jim talked about the tenets. The blue are basically strategic, the red are tactical, and the green are operational. And then essentially what we did is we took 30 years of supply chain management experience and about 13 years in the risk management arena and developed this readiness assessment tool that assesses two things. It assesses your supply chain process maturity level and inherent risk. How does it do that? There are 13 tenets in our point of view that make up an end-to-end, good end-to-end supply chain. The star chart is a maturity model. depicting maturity of a company's supply chain processes, where the lower the number, the more mature the process, and vice versa. The farther away you are from the center, essentially that says you have a less mature process. So what does it look like? Well, when you answer the 92 questions, you can see the black line, which is indicative of a company's answers by tenant. There's about 10 questions in each tenant, and I think we have a slide to kind of show you what it looks like. But essentially, as you go through, you see the black lines. And remember, the farther away from the center, the less mature the supply chain processes are. And then secondarily, we developed inherent risk levels within the chart as well. You can see the three of them. The green circle that is close to the center, that's where the exemplar companies tend to operate. Anything from green to orange, well, you have less mature processes, but more inherent risk. And if you're beyond orange and even beyond the ring of fire, the red ring, we more or less say you have very immature supply chain processes, and therefore you have some pretty high inherent risks. So the tool does two things: measures your supply chain process maturity and also your inherent risk. So with that, we'll move to a few more threads about the tool. Especially tier 2, which Jim talked about. Tier 2 is a benchmarking, so is tier 3. So that requires cross-functional collaboration. Tier 2 focuses on establishing, as Jim and I mentioned, strategic, tactical, and operational perspective and the strengths. When you do tier 2 and 3 and 4, it's a collaborative effort, and we advocate that you bring in as many supply chain operation disciplines as possible. All right. Another one, we said we'd give you a picture image of the questions. This is a glimpse of the activity profile. On the left, we have a question profile. Normally, there's 3 segments, or what we call snippets, for every tenant, and every tenant has a question or a thread. This one is agility, and it talks about disruptive innovation. So within the 3 segments, we ask you to select which segment best represents your as-is condition today. Not your to be, but what you see and witness today, your as-is condition. And then once you select that snippet or section, then we ask that you render an opinion, a number opinion within that section. So essentially, the recap again over on the right is the blue is strategic, the red is tactical, and the green are operational tenets. And so with that, I think we'll move to tier 3, the readiness benchmark. We have several deliverables that we want to give you a sense about the deliverables. So with that, we can move into a few slides talking about tier 3.
Thanks, Greg. So for tier 3, we have, as Greg said, the 2 deliverables, which are the benchmark and your action plan. And we'll go through exactly how that's done. On the right here is the action plan questions that are aligned to the tenants, and we're asking you what priority you are going to put down that relative to your overall goals of your company. And the benchmark is what we're going to talk about next. So again, we've covered tier 1. This is a use case study from an electronics company, one of our clients. And on tier 1 and 2, they had an overall score of 5.7. And from a STO perspective, you can see it broken down there from a strategic level at 4.7, a tactical at 6, and an operational at 6.1. So here you can see this particular company has is doing very mature, let's say, at the strategic level, those 3 tenants. and the tactical and operational are pretty even at 6, which is pretty good. I'd say overall above average, this particular company is. And so then we want to ask, well, how do they perform relative to other electronics companies? And that's where this next industry benchmark comes in. And in this case, they are in that leader quartile. And we covered the quartiles a few minutes ago. The leaders, followers, average, and laggards. And here you can see, as part of the results for this particular deliverable, you'll see where you fit within your industry. And then, as you can see, they have a score, overall score of 5.7, which puts them in this green range. The other thing that this provides is a tier 3 aligned action plan, where the action plan, you're looking at your importance and satisfaction, and we'll get into that in a few minutes here. But the key here is it tells you where you're at and where you're going to go, and helps you get there. That's the real power of tier 3. So going back to the benchmark here, you can see there's a distribution of results. And this is showing the best in class, the Ring of Fire, Apprentice, Mainstream, and Exemplar. So that's the best in class. So that does provide you some type of an indication where you're at. But the real interesting thing is, in this particular case, the electronics is best in class from a industry benchmark perspective, as you can see here. And you can see the full distribution of the companies that have completed the assessment. But you realize that they might be best in class as electronics, but there may be bottom of the class in other industries, or middle of the class in another industry. So just because you're a leader in your industry doesn't mean you're a leader overall in an exemplar, let's say, because they're mainstream overall. This helps you understand what you need to focus on and if you need to focus further. So for this particular company, this use case, electronics company, they're in pretty good standing. They obviously have a program, and they really value supply chain management in their company. And as I remember, they also have a supply chain risk management program, which probably helps them along the way. So the action plan. So looking at the importance, we're looking at importance times maturity. So that's the rating. So we multiply importance times maturity to identify which tenants are the most important to you, to the company that you should be focusing on from a performance perspective. So this is what the company is saying, or in this case, the electronics company is saying is important to work on, and you provide that score. Then the other way to look at it is importance times 10 minus satisfaction. So this also looks at, this is where you're, from an operating day-to-day perspective, you're thinking you have the biggest problems. So here you can see that integrated supply chain and risk management flipped. But in essence, the nice thing about this, the top 3 tenants are pretty clearly identified here, is to say, these are the areas that if you have improvements in your annual operating plan, those are the ones you want to be focusing on to get to that next level of performance. So again, this gives you the roadmap. And with this, we're working with the company, your company, in this case, the electronics company, to help them what in supply, integrated supply chain, and risk mitigation planning do they need to improve upon, and putting that into their annual operating plan. So again, as a recap, for tier 3, you get where you're at within your industry, and then a roadmap to support your goals with an aligned action plan. With that, turn it back over to Greg.
You bet. Thanks a lot, Jim. Essentially, we wanted to give you a bit of a session, couple of slides on how to align your action plan and how to develop a value proposition. So we thought we'd share with you what we've witnessed, both from friends of the consortium and also from our client base, in terms of, what's in it for you. So we wanted to share a couple of statistics. This is kind of a busy slide, but we're sharing it with you. Wanted to present it. It's some salient statistics from basically friends of the consortium over time. Their benchmark KPIs, high level and then in detail. You can see over on the right-hand side, we have 3 columns. All right, those are 3 categories that we've been talking about all day from a benchmark point of view, and that is moving from being a laggard to an average, then moving from average to followers, and then moving from a follower to a leader. And so that's kind of the 3 categories. We put these salient statistics together for you. And then on the y-axis on the left are some of the key KPIs that are used within supply chain management performance. So let's take a look. Top one is revenue growth and margin. That comes from our friends from Gartner and IBF, the Institute of Business Forecasting. You can take a look at the 3 elements in there. Top line revenue growth, you can see the percent increases that you can achieve. Higher margins, what you can achieve as you move through the categories, and then customer delivery as well in terms of achievement. Second one on the left is EBITDA. Earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. Many large companies utilize EBITDA as the best measure of performance, bottom line performance. This comes from Chainalytics. They've been doing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of assessments over time. And those 3 elements are cost to serve. What does it really cost you to serve from a supply chain to your customers? And you could see the improvement, capital management improvement, and then increased net pricing improvement as you move through the quartiles. The third one on the left is RONA, return on net assets. That comes from our friends at Gartner. Again, hundreds of analyses and studies, 3 elements, less inventory. You can see the improvement, higher inventory turns, which is very important to supply chain, and fewer stockouts than your peers. You can see that from the Gartner analysis. And finally, on the bottom, cash conversion cycle. We're big advocates of that. If you don't use that as a metric of success, you should. Wikipedia it. It's easy. It's free. You can calculate it rather quickly. It's basically free cash. Cash is king, especially in a crisis, folks. And that comes from our friends at the Hackett Group. And they give you a sense of cash conversion cycle in calendar days for those 3 quartiles. You can see the improvement. Return on capital, take a look at that. If that doesn't get you excited, I don't know what will. And on time and in full, in terms of the 3 categories. So essentially, the open-ended question is, what is supply chain improvement worth to you? All right. And so we have a few more recap slides to go through. Basically, how to get started. We want to do a recap and then finish with some takeaways. Again, a recap. Tier 1, supply chain readiness. The big thing is it's free, folks. All right. Down on the bottom, you can click, you can actually go into our website, you can ping myself and Jim. Then if you get into tier 1 and go through the free tool, we'd like to hear from you. We'd like to hear how you felt about the process. We're always looking to improve it, who you collaborated with, if any, and if you had any questions, any surprises, what were they? Feel free to send us a quick email, let us know. But it's free. If you want to start somewhere, get into the tier 1 and take a look at it and see what it looks like, and then perhaps you can move forward from there. That's tier 1. Tier 2, recap. All right, this is the STO, strategic, tactical, and operational. We gave you the chart. We gave you the definitions, a couple of insights. Remember, it's starting to look at your strengths. We're trying to give you a sense of maturity and lack of maturity by process. Where do you focus on? How do you improve? and then away we go. What are the deliverables? You get a benchmarking methodology. You get an as is, objective as is supply chain position. You get to look at your strengths and weaknesses, and essentially it provides you some direction. It also gives you a risk assessment level set, and then it can act as a performance gap analysis to help you move forward. So that's follow up on tier 1, tier 2. I'll move it back to Jim.
Thanks, Greg. And just as a reminder, that's for 2.5K. And then for tier 3, it's what you get is some insights of where you are relative to best in class that we just discussed, where you are relative to your industry, your peer tier 3. What does it mean in terms of your supply chain maturity, and how do you prioritize your improvement efforts, and then how do you go about improving with the consulting? So those are the insights you get. Again, the deliverables is that as is supply chain position relative to your industry, and acts as a best in class and industry benchmarking vehicle to evaluate future supply chain improvements through the quartiles. And again, this is 7,500. And then the deliverables, additional deliverables, is it provides you that direction for future to strengthen your supply chain aligned to the marketplace, and provides observations of performance gaps and high risk areas relative to the industry, and provides you that initial risk assessment, level set action plan aligned to your industry. Again, this is so key and aligned to annual operating plan. It really provides you with very little effort from your executive team, a clear path going forward. Some helpful hints for tier 3. Again, as always, pick a business unit or a product line that you're familiar. Different business lines or product lines or divisions are going to result in different responses. Confirm your lead coordinator for the program. Confirm the 5 to 8 stakeholders. Again, we believe that they should come from sales, operations, supply chain, finance at a minimum. Sign up and register to pay, of course, and then log in and enter your importance and satisfaction tenant ratings on top of what you've done in tier 2 of each of the individuals completing the survey. And then when all the registers are completed, the survey will provide that summary for you in a very professional document, and we'll develop those coaching sessions with you to help you plan going forward. Again, we have the 4-tier system. We'll talk about tier 4 in our next webinar. It's really finding out where you are at today on what the tier best fits your organization. Generally, we find that if you're just starting out in your supply chain journey, probably tier 2 is sufficient. If you are a little bit mature and you need a little bit more direction on where you're going, it's tier 3. And then if you want some more coaching, it's tier 4. With that, Greg, an update on tier 1.
You bet. Thanks. We just wanted to give you, again, a little checkpoint on tier 1 on-demand user activity. We launched this August 1st. It's being leveraged by our licensees and partners and webinar attendees like yourselves. We have over 70 active users at the moment. About 40% of those users have completed the tool as of January 14th. So very exciting. The tool crosses all industries, really, truthfully. And you might be having a question in your mind, well, how many observations have you done? Well, just for 10 years, there's been about 3,000 individuals who have gone through this tool. And what we've done is we've taken hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of data points across multiple industries that you see on the right, to be able to statistically feel comfortable with giving you kind of the Bloomberg profile of the quartiles. So if that was a question you might have, I thought we'd just answer that. But very exciting, going across all industries, growing every week. We're very encouraged to see that. And remember, it's free. So we wanted to share that with you in terms of an exciting activity level as of August 1st. All right. Our takeaways for today, basically, if you get into tier 1, which is down on the bottom again, the URL, if you get in and you exercise, however you exercise the answers to the questions, feel free. Tell us how you felt about the process, who you collaborated with. If you had any surprises, what were they? And give us a ping. You can hit us on the website. You can send it to myself or Jim. We just wanted to make sure that you were aware that when you get in, we'd be ready, willing, and able to answer any questions you might have relative to tier 1 and the tool. So with that, we'll finish up our discussion with kind of a recap of our overall consortium offerings. We're on demand, totally virtual. We have 2 education certificate courses. Feel free to take a look at them on the website. We have supply chain readiness assessment tool, which we focused on today. We have another online assessment tool, which is driven directly around and specifically around supply chain risk. We have software platforms that will do heavy lifting for you to support your supply chain risk and resiliency journey. And then again, we do a lot of journey consulting where we lead, guide, direct, and coach companies to move forward in this space. So with that, I'll turn it back to Jim.
Thanks, Greg. Again, if you have any questions, please do reach out. This is the 3rd webinar of our series. Next month on the 23rd, we'll be resuming on the playbook and provide you more insights and more case studies of folks that have completed the survey. And with that, I want to wrap up the webinar. And again, thank you for joining us. We appreciate you taking the time. And we look forward to your follow-up questions. And Greg, any closing comments?
Yeah, again, thanks a lot for attending. We shared with you pretty much a comprehensive level set of our assessment tool. We hope that you see that the tool is accretive in nature. Our methodology is built that way in terms of improving your supply chain processes, especially your strengths and weaknesses. And why are we providing these tools? We want to give your supply chain a booster shot, especially in this time of crisis. We want to accelerate your time to value, and we want to help you survive and thrive in what we call the VUCA environment. So thanks again for attending, and all the best.
Thanks, Greg. And a few closing comments for myself. As we all know, we're living in a VUCA world, or a dynamic world, where we're going to have to adapt to the changing needs. The more mature your supply chain is, the more adaptable you'll be able to deal with these changes. And knowing how to perform relative to your competitors and growing market share is what it's all about in these tumultuous times. So we encourage you to, and we want to help you become more and more mature so you can survive and thrive in these tumultuous times. Again, thank you so much for joining, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar.